What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be doing the Atlanta Falcons 2024 deep dive. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Feel free to go check out all the links in that link tree because it makes it easy for you to go and check out my Twitter where I post there the most. I post here almost every single day, but I post there multiple times a day, including all 22 tapes, so check that out. But also, it's just a great way to take advantage of our sponsors. Feel free to go do that. There's a lot of site specials actually that are happening right now, including for week number 1 for the NFL season. Every single week, UnderDog Fantasy is giving out pretty much use it or lose it specials. So feel free to take advantage of that as soon as possible because you only get them once. So super excited for that. Just feel free to click that top link in the link tree and it does everything for you. It sends me $60, but I promote the brand because I like them. They don't force me to. So let's get right into this, though. Starting out with the draft class breakdown. It's going to be a draft class breakdown, roster breakdown, as well as a records projection, all in one video. But it was probably the least favorite of the drafts, and I'll explain why. Unfortunately, this is Braylon Trice is no longer my actual favorite pick based on, unfortunately, the injury, but I wanted to be able to go back and re-explain my initial reactions, and we'll discuss everything in due time. Currently, my favorite pick most likely would end up being Rook, but even Rook, I mean, I love Rook to death. It's just, dude, that was an expensive pick, but we'll talk about that in a second. Michael Penix, the first pick. I like Michael Penix. I liked him to Atlanta, actually, as a matter of fact. The logic just didn't make sense. It just didn't. So you might say, oh, well, I mean, we have a long-term plan. We're going to Jordan Love this. Michael Penix is older. He's somebody who has relatively poor lower mechanics. He has a cannon of an arm, but he also has injury history. So you're getting someone who is you'd be trying to maximize their career by playing them maybe 1 year in. And if Kirk Cousins were on a different contract, it'd make 100% sense. But you paid Kirk Cousins with the awareness that this was the guy that you were probably going after. So maybe Penix wasn't a bad decision, but then it would be bad to go after Kirk for the amount of money, especially guaranteed, that you ended up giving him. So just the timelines didn't make very much sense, especially at pick 8. I feel like you could have traded back and maybe gotten something, but I mean, especially with the revelation of Braylon Trice, hindsight's always 2020. You could have ended up maybe moving back significantly and getting Dallas Turner Latu, which the edge core still needs a lot of help. But Michael Penix himself is not a bad pick. He's had his flashes, but he does have his lows. We like to talk about his highs, but he does have his lows as well. Did at Washington. He did even in his first preseason game. He had a beautiful, beautiful pass there, though, down the right sideline, and that's awesome. That's the best part about Penix is those big plays. But I'm really wanting to see a little bit more consistency. I did see some of the dips as well as some of the peaks. And, it's good to see the peaks, though. That's super critical. It's good to see those peaks. And I'm hoping that it just remains more consistent in the peaks than the troughs. Rook, I like the pick. The problem is y'all spent some major draft capital moving up. Slipping my mind at the moment, but I just remember the amount that you had to spend to get up there relative to the actual pick was ridiculously high, especially with, pretty sure Johnny Newton was on the board at that point. Maybe he wasn't. I think he was taken right before that, but I digress. Johnny Newton was just taken, then you end up spending a lot of draft capital to move up to select Rook Arorojo. I think it took the extra third-round pick that y'all have, 81. That was just a kick in the nuts for me, and I love Rook. Rook was a top 40 player for me, and so you got good value with the player, but also I wanted him to be able to play some edge, and I'm hoping that he could, but it doesn't look like that's the vision for him. Third round, Braylon Trice at the moment of the pick, which is what the grades are for. The grades are to reflect on how I felt during the draft. It was a great pick because I was hoping he'd get back up to 275, and that was very hopeful to get up to 275 because he dropped to 245 in the offseason after he had a really, really good season. 2 seasons, might I add. Maybe even 3. I'm forgetting the statistics that he had the year before, but the past 2 years were excellent for him at 275. Who cares if you're not an elite athlete? I mean, we saw in the first round that, Darius Robinson didn't test out phenomenally well. And, the talent on the field at that size was what got him really drafted. So, for me, I saw that. I'm like, okay, maybe he was just trying to test well. He was still 245. So, I'm really, really confident that D- is a really adequate grade given the amount of capital and just the asset management that y'all have pretty much invested. in this past offseason. And you guys are going to come at me and say, hey, we're still championship contenders, yada, yada. And you are. But when you almost are a guaranteed playoff threat and you mismanage assets, you crush your ability to have a guaranteed Super Bowl window. And theoretically, it's still there. But there's a lot more that has to go right than if you ended up actually addressing the draft the way I thought you should have, which first round would have been Dallas Turner, Leatu, Latu. Dallas Turner, in my opinion. In round number 2, addressing maybe a corner position. You could have even gotten Cooper DeJean, but there's some health concerns there. You could have gotten Kamari Lassiter. At your pick right there, you could have ended up getting Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's now on your division rival, the Saints. Like, you're still looking for that boundary corner too, especially with the contracts coming up. And then you could have addressed quarterback with Spencer Rattler, even in the 4th round. You could have gotten Brandon Dorless or Braylon Trice. You could have doubled up at edge rusher if you wanted to. But the asset management just was not there, given the spot that y'all are in. You're not in rebuild anymore. You're not. You're not a rebuilding franchise. You're a good franchise that's a playoff contender that had the chance to be the leader, in my opinion, for the Super Bowl. And it was just massive asset mismanagement. But back to the draft class itself. Brandon Dorless, I thought was a very solid pick, very versatile, someone who is similar to Rukaroro, a hybrid edge defensive interior player, hence why I list him as D-line. J.D. Bertrand didn't knock my socks off, but he's a good linebacker. He's a good linebacker. And at 143, not bad. I like it. Jace McClellan, I think, had some injury concerns, but he was a running back that I quite liked as well. Then you got Casey Washington. That was one so far. He's actually looked really good comparatively to where he was drafted. It's 1 week into preseason. Whoop-de fucking do, right? Like, there's some dudes who are just ballers in the preseason. Kenny Pickett. But I'm a Steelers fan if you can't tell. But Casey Washington, to me, when I actually liked his teammate better on Illinois, who he's slipping my mind. I think it's Isaiah Williams. To me, I thought, again, there were also some other players like Brendan Rice on the board. Didn't really make much sense. And then Zion Log, he just never stood out to me. I mean, I just thought that these were, it wasn't actually, they weren't bad picks. Like, you didn't get bad players. That's the ultimate story. But, given the position your franchise is in, you needed difference makers and only a couple small ones to be, in my opinion, I would have put you guys arguably as the Super Bowl favorite. I like to roll the dice sometimes. And, some of the guys at the top are getting a little bit weaker. And if you hit this draft properly, I think I would have put y'all as the number 1. In the 3rd round, I was saying like, oh, maybe another edge, wide receiver, I really did not appreciate the asset management when it came to the draft. And, you guys might not have gotten busts, but you're not a rebuilding franchise. You don't have room really for, mediocrity or, not super impactful players. The ones who will make a difference on your roster this year when your Super Bowl window is relatively open would be those difference makers like Dallas Turner. So, it was just I think it was a mismatch of vision and current status. Now, continuing on, we'll talk about the offense here. We'll go from skill position to line, and then we'll go from a line to skilled position. I think I might have slightly overrated your guys' offensive grade after, looking at it. I'm being like a pretty damn nice here, but I'll leave it as is. So Kirk Cousins, technically Michael Penix as well. It depends on how Kirk is going to be recovering from his Achilles injury. If Kirk can stay healthy, he's been super reliable for a very long time. Just somebody who I like a lot, great personality, someone who I fully support. So I'm a fan. Bijan Robinson, the GOAT. I mean, he was fantastic. The fact you drafted him so early, again, it was interesting because at that point you weren't in that window. But since you acquired Kirk Cousins, it makes sense in hindsight. Again, if you had a draft this year that represented one that would have supported a running back at 8th overall the year before. But, Bijan Robinson's fantastic. You got Tyler Algier backing him up. And then, not to mention Jace McClellan, Avery Williams, etc. You have a really good running back core. Then you look at the receiving room. It should have had Rondale Moore, unfortunately. Pretty sure he's out for the entire year. It's a travesty, but Ray McCloud ain't too shabby, man. He is not too shabby. I like him. He's been a reliable gadget weapon. It's why he's still, viable on a lot of rosters. This is based off of our lads right now, so things are subject to change, but still worth mentioning. But Drake London's fantastic. Another top 10 pick of y'all's, and he was really, really, really reliable there at USC and still reliable now. Darnell Mooney, free agency acquisition. He had a down year, but you got him on a really solid contract. Someone who I think that is a really nice 1-2 punch there with Drake London. And then you got Kyle Pitts at tight end. So, Kyle Pitts can unlock himself. I think that would be a massive, massive W. So for me, I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I'm trying to double check if Austin Stogner, he is still technically there. So spoiler alert, you also get to see a little bit of the UI changing right there. You get to see a little behind the scenes, but yeah, you still got Austin Stogner there as well. Taylor Heineke on a contract year. So overall, I mean, it's a really, really good squad weapons-wise. Offensive line is pretty damn rock solid. Matthews is reliable. Bergeron, good kick in from tackle to guard. Dahlman, semi-underwhelming, but, that's the worst of the best offensive line, arguably, in the NFL. Chris Lindstrom is a freaking rock solid player. Caleb McGarry, he's been pretty damn reliable as well. So overall, a really good roster, especially for Kirk Cousins to have another really good O-line. Super crucial at his age coming off an injury. So you guys are giving him a really good chance to succeed. Now we look at the defense here. I'm being a little bit generous with that B+ grade. I'll admit. But I like you guys, man. I mean, people will try to say I don't like the Falcons. I like the Falcons, man. My first jersey was a Michael Vick jersey. It is what it is. I was a sucker for him. So looking at the defensive line, David Onyemata, I like him a lot. Same thing with Grady Jarrett, Zach Harrison in there, Brandon Dorless, Rukaroro. That's a really good defensive interior, arguably the best unit. But luckily, you guys have some really, really good super weapons outside of that. The edge rushing core does need some work. It does. I could have put that as the worst unit, is the edge group. Arnold Ebiketie, someone who I still fully believe in. Lorenzo Carter, he's up for a contract year. Maybe that will give him the extra push, especially with Braylon Trice now out. Maybe these guys can take a step up. But when I started seeing some news about a trade request from, why am I tripping up on his name now? Hassan Reddick. This was the team I thought of right away that could use that little infusion of goodies. But Joe Douglas already came out and said F you to that idea. Then you got Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson, inside linebackers. I think they're super duper underrated. People try to crap on this linebacking core. I mean, the fact that you also have JD Bertrand backing him up, that's a good, healthy rotation of dudes who are all underrated. Safety wise, Richie Grant doesn't really get me too crazy. DeMarco Hellams is on PUP right now, so it is what it is. But, you have, I think that's your most lacking position. Then you got Jesse Bates there, fantastic free safety, great acquisition. I saw that from when you guys did that, I was like, yeah, that's the move, man. That's a field general. Not many safeties can really garner the respect and the worthiness of the amount of money you spend on them. Some of them you can, but Jesse Bates was a guaranteed success in my opinion, and he has been fantastic. Corner wise, you got AJ Terrell, who's up for a contract this year. Worried about that. But it is what it is. And then, pretty much the whole entire starters are listed as players that need a contract. So D. Alford at nickel, as well as Mike Hughes. There's certainly some good talent underneath them. Clark Phillips, I think, will be perfectly fine to replace Hughes. Hughes was also technically listed as a nickelback before today. But nickel, it's not the easiest thing to be able to address, but I also think Clark Phillips theoretically can move in to nickel and be perfectly fine if you address boundary corner in this next coming draft. So overall, really, really good squad. I think that you have a lot of potential, but again, we all knew that coming into this year. It was whether you would solidify yourself as the Super Bowl competitor in the NFC. So with that being said, even though you guys are semi-ranked lower than expected in my overall rankings, you guys will be seeing some really, really good fruits of your labor right now in the records prediction. And hopping into the records prediction, we already are 8-4. Yes, things are subject to change. That is just what happens. But, I like to stick pretty damn pretty firm on what's happened in the past, unless there's been some new revelations. I.e., theoretically, this week 1 game, Pittsburgh was supposed to be listed before y'all. Of course, with the Braylon Trice injury, I lost a little bit of faith in your edge core, so it allowed me to delay him a little bit longer until maybe a stronger indication of the Ayuk deal is there. So TBD on that. I think if Ayuk is on the Steelers, there is a chance that they could win. But with new quarterbacks, new system, same thing technically with y'all, but I do think that with Bijan Robinson, I think your game is just a little bit more reliable. The Pittsburgh defense is more reliable. However, I don't really trust the quarterbacks at the moment. And, I also trust your defensive backs. So I'm actually going to be giving you guys week number 1 over my Pittsburgh Steelers. So win for y'all. Facing the Philadelphia Eagles in week 2. I don't know if the Eagles line will get enough pressure. They had some struggles. We're going to see about these practices. I'm not sure at the moment what happened with them and the in the New England Patriots. I believe that's who they're facing. If they don't generate a lot of pressure versus them and have a good field session versus the Patriots, then I think you guys could win this game. But the Eagles are rock solid. They're extremely deep. They're also a very talented running team. I do think the Eagles are going to take an early victory because you are also in Philadelphia. Week number 3, we have the Chiefs going to Atlanta. Hollywood Brown's going to be out this time. So the receiving core is relatively weaker, even though it's pretty much a free pass. Hollywood Brown didn't change anything really about their receiving core relative to what it was last year. So they're still a fantastic roster. I do have my concerns in terms of whether the Chiefs could, the Chiefs could pull off something fantastic. I mean, they're really rock solid, and you don't have really the pass rush to compete. So I actually will be giving this one to the Chiefs. I do think they're a superior roster at the moment, and the fact is their weakness is their offensive line, and the tackles wise, and unfortunately their strength is interior. So line versus line, it's strength versus strength. And unfortunately, I actually go with the strengths of Kansas City offensive line wise over the strengths of y'all. So we'll leave it there. The Saints going to y'all's house, I'm perfectly fine leaving it as is. Same thing with the Buccaneers. Their offense is honestly much better comparatively. When we looked at them last year, it was pretty much the defense is super reliable. How's the offense do? Now it's almost the opposite. The offense is, even though you don't have Canales there, it's going to be reliable. You got good guys pretty much everywhere, but it's the defense that's very unreliable in terms of you have to hit a lot of big wins in order for it to be remotely as competitive as it was last year. So going to give y'all that victory. Carolina ended up winning week 6. Carolina is a brutal environment to play in, although I do know that you guys can handle it. I do think that there is some form of element of what gamers call RNG, randomness. And I think I'm going to leave it as is. Not always the best team wins. We all know that. That's just the NFL for you. And I'm going to give it to certain teams that have those environmental assets. And I think the Panthers have that. Now we see actually probably the next team I'm going to be reviewing, the Seahawks, coming to y'all's house. And Seahawks, they have a really good ground and pound. They have a really solid receiving core overall. They have a good team. I do think that, linebacker wise, they actually got some pretty good guys to fill in for the short run. They're a really good team. They are. And they could run the ball down your throat if they wanted to. I do think this is going to be a much bigger challenge than what we think. And I can't just let the home team win every single time. And I think that since they have a little bit extra rest, I know technically you could say the same about y'all the week before, but there's something a little bit different about going from a dome to the hellscape of Carolina than going from the hellscape of Seattle to a dome. So, call it flawed logic, but I do think that there is a chance for that. I do end up splitting y'all because similar to what I just talked about with Carolina, I do think that there is going to be a little bit of an environmental factor that pops in with the Buccaneers. They're not that bad of a team. I do think the Cowboys are susceptible enough to be able to, let up and lose some games here and there. And this is going to be a closer one. I do like the Cowboys a lot. It looks like they're hitting on their rookies. Marshawn Nealon actually just texted me, but Marshawn looked great, but Tyler Guyton was the one that was the big question mark for me. It wasn't Marshawn. Marshawn I already knew was going to be fine. He's someone who just completely outworked what his school was. Like he outproduced. He ended up just doing a fantastic job. But the real one that I was really like putting my eyes on is watching a raw right tackle who's a hyper athlete, but a raw right tackle moved to left, and that was just scaring the shit out of me with Tyler Guyton. And it looks like they're hitting on him. So I'm going to be taking the W there for the Falcons, but it's going to be a closer game than maybe what I would have admitted if this were, pre week 1 in the preseason. Then we talk about the next week. I do like the idea of sweeping at least one of your division competitors, and maybe the Saints aren't the one. Maybe you should sweep Carolina. Like, there's always the chance that you could sweep Carolina, but again, I do think that there's certain teams that I have less faith in, and I have less faith in the Saints to be able to rise up, so to speak, and funnily enough, rise up, than I do for like other teams in your division. I have you guys beating the Chargers off a full bye week. I think that's an easy win right there. The Vikings are actually going to be a pretty tough team. This could end up being an upset game, but I do think that Kirk will be victorious over his previous team. The Raiders are a very, very gritty team. It's especially, I think, honestly, their tackles might be their biggest weakness. And unfortunately, they're matching up their weakness with your weakness there with pass rush. So I'm going to give the Raiders a win right there. And I like the fact that you guys win out at the end of the season. Theoretically, I do want to contemplate letting Washington win a game here. But if I were to do that, I'd probably flip another game. Actually, speaking of Denver, that's a tough game. Honestly, that's a tough game. I would actually debate flipping that. I do like Denver. I do. Bo Nix, I mean, I thought that he had a better outing than some people like to suggest, but I do kind of want to flip a game. 10-7, I think, is pretty adequate for where you guys are at, though. You are winning your division, if you can't tell. Like, you're definitely winning your division. But, I don't think it's going to change much. It's not going to change anything in the long run. Maybe if, like, I'm sitting there and I don't like something, I'll end up changing it. But for right now, I do think, especially at Mile High, random shit happens, and I think Bo Nix is going to be better than what people say. So 10-7, win your division by a pretty damn good margin. You're going to be probably 4th, and you know what? I think that's a really good spot to be, especially with the fact that you guys missed your draft for maximizing what you are. You're gonna maintain consistency of being competitive. So you, as Falcons fans, are going to be happy because your team's always going to be within striking range. But the question is, are they going to be actually within striking range, or are they just going to be sitting in striking range? That would be the difference between if they went after the draft the way I hope they would and the way that they did. So good team, really good team, and just hoping that they could have done a little bit more in a little bit different of an aspect. But nonetheless, that's going to be a video. Thank you so much for watching. Love y'all. See you on the far side. Peace.